Good evening, everyone. We apologize for being a little delinquent in getting in here. We had an executive board meeting. We met and opened our meeting at 5 o'clock tonight so we could do an hour of an executive session. We ran a little bit over. I apologize for that. We'll try to get this back on track and get it going. Welcome tonight to the November meeting of the Milford Board of Education. It is November the 10th. It is 6:08. So let's get started, and we're going to pick up, if you have an agenda, we're going to pick up with item number 5 in the opening items. So at this point, I need a motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting for October 20th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Rabe, call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Now we're going to have presentation of the colors by the ROTC from Milford High School.
Color guard, attention. Carry, colors. Post. Ready? Post. Present. Arms. Order. Arms. Post. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, face. Forward, arms.
If everyone could stand for the national anthem, please.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Mr. Spicer, will you take us into presentations, please?
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. It is my honor this evening to introduce Aaron Zupka, our Director of Athletics.
All right. Oh, no, you don't need, please, no. Not necessary, but thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's my honor and pleasure to be here this evening. Obviously, our fall season this year has been anything, but ordinary. We've had one of the best, if you go back to last year, one of the best 12-month-plus runs of Milford athletics, and this fall has been no different than that. Just when you thought you couldn't do any better than last year, we've come out of the gates pretty strong here. So I am honored to recognize two amazing groups of student athletes tonight that really deserve our recognition and attention, and just to congratulate them on a fantastic season here. So I'm going to start first with our boys cross country regional qualifying team. So 7 young men, will you come up here, stand up here, and we'll embarrass you a little bit. Coaches, feel free to join them. You guys deserve to get up there too, so. So I don't know what you did in 2007. I know where I was. I might have been just graduated college a little bit ago, but it's been a long time. So it's been 15 plus years since we've had a regional qualifying boys cross country team. These young men up there had a fantastic season. They finished 3rd place or better in 6 meets, including they were 3rd at the Lakota Fall Classic, 3rd at the Lebanon Invite, 3rd at Little Miami. They won the Miami University Red Hawk Rumble. They were 3rd in the ECC and 3rd in the district. And Southwest Ohio is no doubt the most competitive district out there in the state of Ohio. So the fact that they were able to do that was truly amazing. They were the first regional qualifying team since 2007. Obviously, they had quite a team that year. And our sophomore Charlie Voss finished 17th in the region at Troy, and he's the first boys individual state qualifier since 2007. If you remember Matt Belliston, some of you may know Matt from the area. And Matt's been so gracious to reach out to Charlie and wish him well. Charlie went and ran at Fort Obetz last weekend, finished 45th in the state. He was seeded at 64th with his time and improved his spot by 19 places. So that showed how good he ran that day. And it was some very difficult running conditions. The winds were swirling. It was like a mini hurricane up there. It was crazy. So he ran a 16:27 and finished 45th as a sophomore. So I know he's only going to improve. Our team, 5 out of 7 return next year, but quite an accomplishment that hasn't been seen in a long time here at Milford High School. So we want to commend them, our coaches, Coach Richmond, Coach Dumont here on a fantastic season. So congratulations, gentlemen. I'm going to call your names, give your certificate, and if you would head down there, we'll take a picture here in a second. So Charlie Voss. Paul Dumont. Owen Stewart. You said DJ's not here? Luke Eminger. Henry Craycraft. And Ashton Voss. If you want to go through and you guys want them to walk through. They usually say something. Congratulations. Can I give you DJs? Yeah, if you go out there, take a picture. You guys got to go take a picture and send it in. Come do soccer. And then
Congrats.
shirts there. Dry fit. Give me one next year, okay? Thank you, gentlemen. Next, we're going to recognize a historic girls soccer team there. So ladies, if you come up here, you can spread out and be recognized. Coach, if you would come up here too. I know you love attention, so let's get you up here. Oh, yeah. And we're missing about 7 young ladies today who are at club seasons. With no surprising, shortly after our season's over, they're out getting better and working on their craft and getting ready for either next season here or possibly playing at the next level. So we're a little slim today, but obviously you understand why. I was just thinking of words to describe this team. I've been in high school athletics for 12 years and youth and recreation athletics for 17 years, and I don't think I've ever seen a team quite like this. They're dynamic, they're compelling, they were exciting. They captivated our whole school, our community. I wasn't alive when the Beatles made their run, but they were like the Beatles this year. Like, everyone wanted to be close to them, be a part of it. Like, they got so much attention where, other teams were getting jealous of them and how cool they were. And, the youth kids wanted to be, honestly, it was a phenomenon. And I don't know if they realize how much impact they had on our youth and alumni. I was getting messages from all over the country, watching games. I don't think they'll truly appreciate the season till later in their life. But just to summarize a couple things. They were 19-2, which is the best record we've ever had. ECC champs. They were district champions after the last 2 years not getting past the district level. They finally went home with the gold there. And then obviously they were regional qualifiers. Unfortunately, came up a little short to Seton, who's still playing right now. I'm not going to bring that up because we might be still a little bitter because we know we were good enough to be there, but that's how the sports work sometimes. They won the 3rd district title in the 44 years of women's soccer here. It's only the 3rd district title and the first since 2011. So, that's a long time ago. Most wins in a season with 19, best winning percentage at 91%, most goals scored ever 84, longest win streak 16-0 to start the season. And they won every all-league, all-district, all-state honors you can think of. Some's been announced, some will be announced soon, including, we've had the Coach of the Year. Coach Helms was the ECC Coach of the Year. Anna Manning is the Offensive Player of the Year again, and there's a lot of other district and individual stuff. They were ranked as high as number 1 in the city, high as number 1 in the state, and high as number 8 in the nation. So pretty remarkable. We've never been in that conversation on a state or national or city that I'm aware of lately. They beat defending state champs, MND, who hadn't lost in like 50-plus games. We probably had 2,000 people at Cherry Lucas Field, which if the fire marshal came, they would have shut us down. There were so many people on the hills. It was an atmosphere that I've never seen. They beat a lot of good teams, top 10 teams, Beaver Creek, West Claremont, Oak Hills, a lot of great teams. They beat Seton 2-0 during the year, who could possibly be the state champs. So all that said, there's a lot to be said here, and after the game, unfortunately, in the season, it's probably not the right time to say some of this, but I feel like I wanted to take the time to show my thanks, appreciation, how this has no doubt been the best women's soccer team we've ever had in our school history. And I know you're all biting at the bit, wish we were playing tomorrow at 1 o'clock, but I hope you realize how special of a run this is, how much you've impacted the families, the youth, the kids. The ramifications in this season, the impact will outlive your high school careers here. It's going to be going on for a while, and there's going to be good programs because they wanted to be like you when they were growing up. So I'm really proud. Our slogan all year was "Let them know," and I think we let them know what we're about. We're on the map, and we became a household name on the local, state, and regional level. So congratulations to all these young ladies. They're very deserving. Is Jesse here? Jesse's not here. Ashlyn? Oh, there's Jesse. Jesse Nagel. Sorry, I wasn't sure. Is Ashlyn Schaefer here? No. Joelle Stinson. Kelsey Fields. Julia Stanzel. Ava Hassert. Peyton Smith. Caitlin Evans. Ella Hyatt. Peyton Cook. Carly Stinson, who signed yesterday to play at Cleveland State University. Congratulations, Carly. Audrey Stromat. Whitney Sluter, almost off crutches. She's getting there. Sage Gibson. The Anna Manning. Lizzie Fight. Skylar Helms. Lindsay Taylor. Abby Smith. Abby Hovener. Marley Scanlon. Kristen Burns. And Coach Jill Helms does a phenomenal job with our young ladies in program. So please join me in giving them the much-deserved recognition they deserve. Any parents, we're going to walk out the back, take a picture. You're welcome to join us here, and then you're free to leave.
All right, we are on to our Veterans Day presentation. Would like to ask Mr. Gary Knepp, Mr. Larry Corley to come up to the microphone.
Good evening. My name's Larry Curlis. I'm an assistant to Gary Knepp here. He does a Veterans Day program every year, and this year he decided to choose the topic of the Civil War and asked me to do a little research on the Battle Hymn of the Republic, kind of a rallying song for the Union troops. Battle Hymn of the Republic has a very interesting story. "Oh Brothers" was the first name of the tune. This was a folk hymn in the southern states, first documented in the early 1800s, and by the 1850s, the familiar "Glory, Glory, Hallelujah" chorus was developed. On May the 12th, 1861, the song "John Brown's Body" was publicly played using the tune from "Oh Brothers" and the chorus of "Glory, Hallelujah." This all occurred at Fort Warren near Boston, Massachusetts. Members of the 2nd Infantry Battalion of the Massachusetts Militia collectively worked out the lyrics to "John Brown's Body." John Brown was a staunch abolitionist prior to the Civil War. He was captured and hung in December of 1859 for leading an attack at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. In 1890, George Kimball wrote an account about how all this came about. He wrote that some leaders of the battalion felt that the words were coarse and irrelevant. 2 new verses were created. They go like this: "John Brown's body lies a smoldering in the grave. His soul is marching on." And the second verse was, "He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. His soul is marching on." The new lyrics were prepared for publication with the help of a publisher, C.S. Hall. Kimball's battalion was then dispatched to Murray, Kentucky. Early in the Civil War, Julia Ward Howe heard this song during a review of troops outside Washington, D.C. Howe's companion at the review, the Reverend James Freeman, suggested Howe write new words for the fighting man's song. Staying at the Willard Hotel in Washington, November the 18th, 1861, Howe wrote the verses to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. This in her words: "I went to bed that night as usual and slept according to my wont, quite soundly. I awoke in the gray of the morning twilight, and as I lay waiting for the dawn, the long lines of the desired poem began to twine themselves in my mind. Having thought out all the stanzas, I said to myself, I must get up and write all these verses down, lest I fall asleep again and forget them. So with a sudden effort, I sprang out of bed and found in the dimmest an old stump of a pencil, which I remembered I had used the day before. I scrawled down the verses almost without looking at the paper. Howe's Battle Hymn of the Republic was first published on the front page of the Atlantic Monthly in February of 1862. Julia Ward Howe was married to Samuel Gridley Howe, a famed scholar in the education of the blind. Samuel and Julia were active leaders in anti-slavery politics and strong supporters of the Union. Samuel Howe was a member of the Secret Six, the group that funded John Brown's work. Over the years, who knows how many times the song has been used, but just to name a few, and there were many. The song is included along with her performance of "We Shall Overcome" on Joan Baez's Concert Part 2. live material recorded during Joan Baez's concert tours of early 1963. Judy Garland performed this song on her weekly television show in December of 1963. She originally wanted to do a dedication show for President John F. Kennedy upon his assassination, but CBS would not let her, so she performed the song without being able to mention his name. At Winston Churchill's funeral on January 30th, 1965, Churchill's favorite hymns were sung, including the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Andy Williams experienced commercial success in 1968 with a cappella version recorded at Senator Robert Kennedy's funeral. Nita Bryant performed it January 17, 1971 at the halftime show of the Super Bowl V. She will also do it again on January 25th, 1973 during the burial services for LBJ at his Texas ranch. The song is one of 3 American songs included in an American trilogy. This was a 1971 song medley written and performed by country composer Mickey Newberry. Newberry's song was popularized by Elvis Presley, who included it as a showstopper in his concerts. Presley recorded and issued an American trilogy several times, and it is a great rendition. And last but not least, the Naval Academy Glee Club performed the song on September the 1st, 2018, at the funeral of Senator John McCain at the Washington National Cathedral. Also, there were many sporting events that used this song, but completely different lyrics, of course. One that stands out, you can't make this stuff up. It's called Jesus Can't Play Rugby, and it goes like this. The parody song Jesus Can't Play Rugby, popular at informal sporting events, uses the traditional melody under improvised lyrics. Performances typically feature a call and response structure, whereas one performer proposes an amusing reason why Jesus Christ might be disqualified from playing rugby. Jesus can't play rugby because his dad will rig the game, which is then responded back by other participants, mirroring the repetitive structure of John Brown's body. Before ending with the tongue-in-cheek proclamation, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, concluding the final verse, Jesus, we're only kidding. So, that's a few of those. Well, I hope you have learned a little bit about the Battle Hymn of the Republic, maybe more information than you required. Tomorrow's a very special day, but today, on November the 10th, 1775, an important event occurred also. Today is the 247th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. So all you leathernecks out there, Semper Fi to you. Tomorrow, of course, is Veterans Day. And no matter what branch, where you served, when you served, or what you did, be proud of your service. Thank you all. God bless you and your families. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
I do appreciate every year having the opportunity to speak about our veterans. I want to salute all of our veterans. We love you, we respect you, and we appreciate everything you've done while you served and also while you're living in our community. We recognize all the contributions that veterans make. 161 years ago, millions of Americans left their homes to fight in a war that the South would call the war between the states. The North referred to as the War of the Rebellion, and we know it today as the Civil War. 750,000 of them did not come home. That represented 2% of the overall population. If it was held in the same ratio today, and we had a war that many people died, it would represent almost 6 million deaths, if you could imagine that. 58,000 men in the Union Army died of diarrhea alone. That's equal to the number of men who died in Vietnam. There were more casualties in the three-day battle at Gettysburg than were casualties sustained at the War of 1812 and the American Revolutionary War combined. 60,000 men received amputations. Of those 60,000, just 21,000 survived the 10-minute operation. Statistics can put a gloss on things, can kind of shape the contours of the conflict, but it often obscures the experiences of the individual. On October 21st, 1861, the Second Lieutenant John Willie Gout of Massachusetts was killed at Ball's Bluff, Virginia. His body fell into the Potomac River. 5 days later, it washed up on the shore 35 miles away in Washington, D.C. His death inspired the poem, The Vacant Chair, which I'll read one stanza. Quote, "We shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. He shall linger to caress him, and while we breathe our evening prayer." Those words were later put to the song known as The Vacant Chair, and it became a very popular song during the entire era as it came to symbolize the sense of loss that many families in the United States were suffering at the time. Milford was very active in the war, and I want to cover two stories involving two different people. In 1860, Milford was described as a pretty village of 600, mostly foreign-born, meaning German. When they received notice of the war's beginning, the citizens of Milford met in the newly finished Kluger Hall, which is where the old library is today across from the distillery. They met, they discussed the situation, they pledged their allegiance to President Abraham Lincoln and to the Union cause. And they also decided to set up a home guard to protect the village from any invasion by the Confederates. Francis McCormick Gatch was appointed captain. He was one of the 13 Gatches who served during the Civil War. After about a month of drilling and getting ready for their public debut, the Mountain Guard met in their uniforms with their muskets in center of town, went through their evolution of close order drill, and then marched out to the home of Thomas Gatch, which is located where DER construction and the 131 and 50 is located. Patriotic speeches were given, a flag was raised, and the most important aspect of the event began, a community-wide picnic, at which time one commentator stated that the tables literally moaned under the weight of the victuals. The Home Guard was folded into the Ohio National Guard. In the spring of 1864, the government called up the National Guard for active duty to guard railroad areas, bridges, and other facilities to free up the regulars for the summer offensive. 35,000 men from Ohio responded. 8,000 mustered in at Camp Dennison, including John Pattison, who would later own the Promont Mansion and later became governor of Ohio in 1905. He was 16 years old. Daniel W. Stevens, who was the headmaster of the Milford Union Academy, was also present. And so was Gilbert Fisher. Fisher was a 31-year-old Scottish-born house painter who lived with his wife Molly and their two children in a house near Meyer. Out of those 8,000 men, various regiments were formed, including 153rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry, of which out of the 900 men, 750 from Claremont County. The Milford Home Guard formed the core of Company H. If you walk through Green Lawn Cemetery, you'll be able to find at least 43 graves of men on the 153rd Ohio, of men who were veterans and later buried there. The 153rd was sent to Paw Paw, West Virginia, to guard the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. They received intelligence that a small group of bushwhackers were coming out to do some damage to the railroad. They called members of the Company H to meet them. Their intelligence was bad, very bad. Instead of a handful of bushwhackers, they ran into nearly a battalion-sized group of Confederate soldiers, which is about 300 to 400. They were outnumbered 10, 15 to 1. They fought as hard as they could. They were surrounded, ran out of ammunition, and many of them were captured, including Gilbert Fisher. Fisher moved about 2 weeks south and further south by railroad, by walking, by wagon. They stayed in open fields at night, in warehouses, and in county jails. They finally came to their destination called Camp Sumter, which was known better to history as Andersonville. Andersonville was hell on earth. 40,000 Union soldiers at one time were at Andersonville, and nearly 13,000 died. That represents a 40% mortality rate, which equaled that of the Japanese prisoner of war camps in World War II. Fisher kept a diary chronicling his daily struggles to survive. He was one of the lucky ones and was released in March of 1865, right just before the war ended. He was on a train towards the home in Martinsburg, West Virginia, at which point, as he got off the train as it was getting ready to refuel. He got some food and he climbed back onto the train, and just as he was getting ready to do so, the train lurched forward, running over his foot. He was thrown back and was holding up as much as he can over the trestle until he could hold no longer, and he fell 40 feet, breaking his neck and dying on his way home. They found a letter from his wife, $8 in cash, and the diary in his pants pocket. He came home and is buried in Greenlawn Cemetery. Asbury Gatch was the son of Reverend George Gatch and the grandson of Reverend Philip Gatch. He grew up in his house that's located where the Milford Shopping Center is today. By the time the war broke out, he was married to Henrietta Hopper. They had 2 children and lived in a brick ranch in Milford on the island, what was known as the Island, where it was torn down to make room for the new apartment buildings there. He worked in Cincinnati at a restaurant or at a grocery store that he purchased. He commuted between Cincinnati every day on the railroad back and forth to Milford. He was 31 years old in 1863 when he enlisted in the Army, and he went to Camp Dennison for his basic training. He was appointed captain of Company L, which had mostly men from Claremont County, of the 9th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry. They were sent south in February of 1864, and were based basically in the area of Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. During his time there, he wrote a series of 110 letters to his wife. I've had the fortunate opportunity to compile those letters and edit them into a book of his 110 letters that are the originals are at Probont. This is what I recall of him from reading those letters as I describe him. This is a portrait of a man of honor and conviction from Milford, Ohio, who dearly loved his wife and family, who often dreamed of soft bread and porterhouse steaks, gossiped about the home front, criticized the stay-at-home patriots, and derided the Southern aristocracy who wrote glowingly of his wartime exploits. Mid-February, July of 1864, he was called out on a raid with 2,300 of his comrades. They was to support the efforts of the Atlanta offensive by destroying railroads and military supplies. It was known as the Rousseau Raid after this commanding officer. He wrote a letter home to his wife, Etta, on July 31st, 1864, from Marietta, Georgia. I'd like to read briefly from one of that letter. My dear wife, I am inside our lines, but as near worn out as possible. Only think of it, 14 days and night in the saddle, with only 2 hours of sleep in the 24, and 1 meal of cornbread with a little meat. We have made the greatest raid since the beginning of the war. We have traveled directly through the heart of the Confederacy, destroying 30 miles of the Montgomery and Atlanta Railroad, millions of dollars worth of cotton and rebel stores, ironworks, mills, and all kinds of government properties. I will not attempt a thorough description of our march, as I have no conveniences for working, and I'm anxious that you should know that I made it safely through. We had several fights on the road, lost 3 or 4 killed and as many wounded, captured a great many prisoners and killed a great many Rebs. Most of them fell into our hands, and he described the cities that he went through, such as Decatur, Alabama, Talladega, Somerville, and West Point, Georgia. We moved near West Point in the direction of Atlanta, clearing as we moved. We left fast on the 20th since the Yankees, the rebels, were coming after us. Our work is considered the boldest and most daring raid carried out in the rebellion, and will force the evacuation of Atlanta by tomorrow night. It was actually a month and a half later. He was a little off by that. They are doing hard fighting here yesterday and today. I can hear on our right, a continued belching of the heaviest guns. We will conquer. General McPherson was killed yesterday, and many poor soldiers who were sent to their long homes, meaning their graves. Larry, do you want to show what, we have some artifacts that are at the Milford Historical Society.
These are all from Asbury Gatch. This would be his ceremonial sword, much more fancy. It's in excellent shape. You can't see it from where you are, but it's got U.S. on one side, a lot of filigree on the other. The other side is a spread eagle wings. That's the ceremonial. This would be his battle sword. It's got a few nicks. Obviously not as fancy. Same sword, just used. And the last little thing is a more modern version of the old-time powder horn. It's like this little lever here, and dump it in. And there still is gunpowder in it. I dumped it on a piece of paper earlier, and little bits fell out. So those all belong to Asbury Gatch. These are on run from the Vermont Museum.
Thank you, Larry. Asbury Gatch came home. He lost his wife and son within the next 2 years and moved to Columbus, where he became a contractor for a railroad and lived until 1910 and came back home and is buried in the Greenlawn Cemetery. There are 174 Union veterans who are buried in the cemetery at Greenlawn. I would like to close with what is known as a wartime prayer. This is attributed to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. The handwritten poem prayer was found in her purse when she died. It was believed to have been written in 1942, which is some of the darkest hours of World War II. Dear Lord, lest I continue my complacent way, help me to remember that somewhere, somehow, out there is a soldier who died for me today. As long as there be war, I thus then ask and answer, am I worth dying for? I think that as long as we continue to have men and women at harm, we should continue to ask that question of ourselves, that we are worthy of their sacrifices. And for the 18 million veterans in the United States, again, we reiterate our heartfelt thanks and hope that you have a meaningful holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We look forward to you coming every year for Veterans Day. It is now my privilege to let everyone know that in front of you are all these wonderful boxes. Each year we have our annual Treats for Troops campaign from October 24th to November 4th this year. We certainly appreciate our families and students that participated. It is certainly a noble and wonderful cause for us every year. I'd like to introduce Ms. Diana Lawrence with Troop Box Ministries, that will share more about where these donations will go and the military members that they support.
Good evening. I'm Diane Lawrence, Troop Box Ministry from Brown County. This is my sister, Jean Johnston, and she's worked with me from the very beginning that we started the Troop Box Ministry. And I got to wondering about how long we had been doing this. I think I mentioned it before. So I thought I'll look back through my newsletters, which I put out once a month. And I went back as far as 2013. And I seen where we had been grand marshals in the Milford Christmas Parade. And then I also read down on the letter that we had got boxes from the kids here in Milford. And so I didn't go back any farther. We have been doing this 21 years plus, before we even become a nonprofit organization and before we had a Troop Box Ministry title. So it's been quite a bit of boxes sent out. Sometimes we started out with just letters and cards and pictures that they wanted to see. Then it kept growing. We never imagined that it would get to the point where it's at now. But we have a lot of volunteers that help us. I especially thank the Milford School Board, the administrative offices, all the people, the kids, the parents, everybody that donates and lets those kids bring this in, because these boxes go wherever we have deployed soldiers, men and women, and we get these names sometimes from the deployed men and women that are already across the waters. Some of it is family, friends, neighbors that give us their kids' names. So this is how we get names, and always getting new addresses. We might have 2 or 3 come back. In a month's time, we may pick up 4 or 5 more the same time. So it kind of balances out pretty good. What is amazing is how much we get out of these boxes. And she was telling me, Jennifer Schaefer, I appreciate her working with me all this time. She said there's more boxes than this that she didn't bring out. So we can work so long, so many months and months out of this. And sometimes a lot of the things that we get out of that box we can't send, like if it's a canned food that's big. All of that goes to the veterans. We have a veterans office in Georgetown. It's not the veterans home, but it's just a veterans office. They have a food pantry that those veterans come in and pick this food up daily. A lot of them have to have that food. So any extra that we have goes to the veterans. So it's not only helping our young men and women that's active duty, but it's helping the veterans that's already there. So anybody can go in and let them know, they need some help. So we appreciate how much is in these boxes. You just never know. And it's always a big surprise when we look at it. We don't know what's in the box till we open it up. So when we get them home, and in time we'll call different groups in, and we have to unpack every box and repack it in a different box, and sometimes bag it and whatever. So there's a lot of work involved in that, but nothing like what we just appreciate everything that we get. Everything we get, we either ship it or it goes to the veterans. So we're just so happy that we can say that, especially the kids, the parents, I know it's not just kids bringing it in, the parents know about it too. We like for them to know what's happening here. We want them to know what this is all about, be a patriotic citizen, and we can see that every year that we come, that we can see that by just like the color guard coming in, the young people doing their part. So we're so thankful for that. That's one of the things we like to do, is promote that, get as many young people involved in recognizing the need that this country has. So we just want everybody to know how much we are so thankful for this. Appreciate all that you do, and we take nothing for granted. Just appreciate it so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Mr. Knapp, Mr. Connolly, and Diana as well. We appreciate you coming here and sharing with us. I look forward to this every Veterans Day, to seeing you guys and learning a little bit more about Milford history. It's one lesson a year, but it's always entertaining, and it's always something that's meaningful for this community. So thank you very much. Let's move on forward to public participation. Mr. Rabe?
I have nothing for the first one.
Okay, very good. At this point, we're going to move on to Board of Education items. I need a motion to approve Emily Chestnut as the Great Oaks Career Campus Governing Board member, representing our Board of Education.
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
Thank you, Emily, for doing this.
I want to say thanks to the board for allowing me to do this. I don't know, I will admit I don't know a ton about vocational and everything that Great Oaks can do, so I really look forward to learning about that and being our representative.
Well, I know you'll do an outstanding job, but we would be remiss if we didn't say you have some big shoes to fill from Mr. Yaki, having done this for 20 years, I believe.
21.
21 years.
I told him I could not commit for that long.
So that was the 20 years that he served on the board, plus one additional year at our request at the start of last year.
Yep.
So thank you very much. So any other comments? Mr. Rabe, call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. We're now going to move on to the appointment of an interim treasurer whose name I'm going to say poorly.
Jouffre,
Okay.
Robert Jouffre.
You can do it.
Okay, as anybody who's been following the board knows that Mr. Rabe is leaving us at the end of this month and taking another position with the Great Oaks Board. So he's still going to be a treasurer. He's just not going to be Milford's treasurer, unfortunately. So in the process, we are in the process of looking to hire a new treasurer. And that takes some time. We want to make sure we get the right person in. So in the time between Mr. Rabe's departure and us hiring a new treasurer, which we hope is a month or so, we need an interim to take care of the business for our district. We have to have people who sign checks and does things like that. So we have Mr. Say that again. Jouffre. That's going to take a while for me. We have Mr. Jouffre, who is going to be filling those shoes after we vote here in a few minutes. So any other comments? Oh, no, I need a motion first, sorry.
I motion to approve the contract of the interim treasurer.
The contract, yes.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Let's move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Brian Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President. First item on the agenda is the approval of the board reports for the month ending October 31st, 2022.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the board reports for October.
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
Just two items really to point out. October ended the cash balance with just shy of $47 million in the bank. Interest on the general fund, $36,000 on the month, $86,000 on the year. And bond retirement fund, there is $6,000 interest on the month, $165 for the year.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
The next item is a presentation of the 5-year forecast. There you go. Okay. You can go to the next one, Steve. Okay. So by the state of Ohio, we are required to file a 5-year forecast twice each year and have that board approved, once in November and then again as an update in May. And then forecasting, any type of future forecasting is always considered a best practice of GFOA. Real quick, as you look at the forecast only covers the general fund. I know we have a lot of other funds for bond retirement, student activities, federal programs. Those are not included in this forecast. The forecast only pertains to the general fund. The forecast itself is 3 years of actual historical data as well as 5 years of forecasted data, and as well as a number of assumptions that go along with the calculation. As we get into the revenues, looking at the revenues, estimated revenues, we'll talk about real estate taxes, state funding, interest on investments, TIF payments, tuition, as well as paid participation fees. So as we get into the real estate tax, obviously real estate property taxes is the largest income source for the district. real estate taxes are all based upon property values. In Claremont County, property values were reappraised in 2020. When we look at calendar year 2020, which is a tax collection year of 21, when they had that reappraisal, property values increased 6.82% at that time. Prior years, when there's no reappraisal or triennial update, the average increase is right around 1.5 to 1.25 to 1.5% increase on an annual basis. Because the district has 3.3 mills in inside millage, the district does receive some new money on increased values, but again, it's 3.3 mills. So overall, it's not a whole lot of an increase. The vast majority of the increase that we get in real estate property year over year is a result of sales, housing sales. Also, when we hit COVID, we did see a spike in delinquencies. We did receive a significant increase in last calendar year as far as collection of delinquencies. They did fall off this past year. However, they're still up compared to where they have in the past. So I believe moving forward, delinquencies will start going back to their normal levels of what we've seen in the past. To give you an idea, the spike was about $670,000 in delinquencies that were caught up. This past calendar year was $491. We typically average somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 on an annual basis. State funding. State funding is the second largest revenue source for the district. This past biennial budget, so the state budget's on a 2-year basis. This past biennial budget included last year and this year. The state did implement a new funding formula that went into place. However, the state is phasing that formula in. The projection was that they would increase 1/6 each year for 6 years. However, because the biennial budget's 2 years, we can only guarantee 2 years. I feel that they'll most likely continue with the phase-in, considering where they're at, but again, there's no guarantee moving forward. So when we look at the forecast, we base it upon what we currently have, and we flatline it throughout the forecast, because there's no guarantees the state's going to truly hold that true. At the end of the 6-year phase-in, it is estimated the district will receive an additional $300,000. So right now, the forecast doesn't do us a whole lot of good, even at the end once it's fully implemented. Couple changes that they did make, if you'll see there at the bottom, the tuition payments. As you look in the forecast in 21, these items would have been expenses or these items would have been revenues that were received in last fiscal year, 22, and then obviously moving forward, these items are being funded differently. Therefore, the money is not flowing through us the way it has in the past. So you'll see there's a significant change in revenues as far as the state is concerned. Also, as you look in the forecast, if you're going back years, we did have the 2 reductions as a result of COVID, $1.2 million in fiscal year 20, and then another $561 that occurred in fiscal year 21. Also in this line is money that we received from casino revenue. Last year, or 2 years ago, we did see a decline because of COVID. Last year, we saw that number jump back up to about $411,000 in casino revenues, and we did receive our first of 2 payments so far this year, and it's actually a little bit higher up. So I project we'll see somewhere in the neighborhood of $425 that's going to come through casino revenues. The other piece, not knowing where it's going to go, is the sports gambling that takes effect here in Ohio in January 1st. A good portion of those revenues are supposed to be funneled back down to school districts. Obviously, we have no idea what that's going to look like at this time, so we didn't forecast anything for that. And then the last piece that's included in that state funding formula is it's what's considered catastrophic cost. Catastrophic cost is for high-need special ed students. The state caps it at a certain dollar amount, and anything above and beyond that dollar amount, you can ask for reimbursements from the state. The state basically sets aside a set dollar amount, and then depending on how many districts apply to the pool, depends on how much you get. In the past, we've typically gotten about $600,000 to $700,000 out of this pool. Last year, we saw that jump to $1.3 million that we got out of that pool. So again, it all depends on how many special ed students that we have that meet the criteria, as well as how many schools across the state apply for the funding. When we look at all other funding revenues, what's included in that number is manufactured homes, tuition from outside districts, interest income. We do have a number of TIFs with Miami and Union Township, and we also get Medicaid reimbursement. Two items to point out here: interest income. We did see a decline in our interest income because of where interests have been out for the past year and a half or so. Obviously, interest rates have taken a complete turn, where in the past we were getting 0.25% interest. Now we're seeing 3s and sometimes 4% on our return on investments. So I fully expect the interest income to creep back up to where it was previous levels. The other item, as you look at the 5-year forecast, it's more of a timing issue as far as the crossing over of fiscal years. Given our fiscal year ends in June, we did receive the Miami Township TIF of about $1.3 million that we typically would have seen occur in June of last year, didn't come until July of this year. So when you look at this line item, you'll see a significant jump in revenues compared to last year, and then a decline in fiscal year 2024. That's the result of that one time, just as far as when that payment was received. It just crossed fiscal years. So as we look at total receipts from fiscal year 22, almost $46 million in receipts. As you can see, 58% of that is a result of property taxes, 34% comes from the state, and 8% comes from all other revenues. So what's included here is what's the 5 years projections on the 5-year forecast. Again, there's a slight increase year over year in real estate taxes. The unrestricted and the restricted aid, that's the state funding formula. As you can see, that's flatlined. Property tax allocation, this is the rollback in the homestead, which has a direct correlation to the real estate tax. So as long as the real estate tax is going up, that line item will go up as well. And then again, all other financing sources, and you can see there in 23, it's 8.3 million, then it drops down to 6.7 as a result of that TIF payment. The other item that's going to show up in this year is we did the Charity Lucas Field last year. We did receive the donation from the boosters and FCC, which was reflected in last fiscal year. The $250,000 from the grant, we had to wait till the project was completed, which occurred in this fiscal year. So that $250,000 is included in that all other item as well. When we look at expenditures, obviously we're looking at employee salaries, employee benefits, purchase service supplies, capital outlay, and fees. When we look at employees, obviously we project the current staff that we currently have. We do have the 2 unions with the teachers union. We do have that contract that extends until the end of 26 at a 2% annual rate increase. And then the classified staff is through the end of 24, and that's a 2% increase as well. Any years that aren't under contract, we estimate about a 1% increase in salaries. When we look at employee benefits, when I look at benefits, I look at them 2 ways. There's the mandatory benefits and there's the voluntary benefits. When I say mandatory benefits, these are benefits that were required by state and federal government. So with the retirement systems, they require that we pay 14% of a person's salary into the pension fund. And then with the federal benefits, you're looking at Medicare is 1.45%. The other half, which is the voluntary benefits, you're looking at dental, health, and life insurance. Right now, our dental insurance, we did see a drop in last year because we did change carriers. These are on a calendar year basis, and we are at a 0% for the next 2 years. After that, in the contract, there's a max increase of 7%, and then the following years, there's a max increase of 9%. When we look at health benefits, because we're self-insured, our rates are driven by our claims. This past year, we saw a number of high claims. We saw an 8.3% increase in health benefits, and then also where health benefits are going moving forward, costs going up. We project about a 10% increase over the course of the forecast of that increase. Purchase services. So purchase services, the large item that comes out of purchase services is going to be our transportation and our utilities. However, because the district has had a significant cash balance over the past several years, there are a number of different capital improvement projects, one-time items that the district committed to. So when we look at that, obviously we have the charity Lucas Field, but again, the money paid for that was all donated, which is obviously included in our revenues, but the cost of that's going to end up in the purchase service. We also had the stadium lighting that we did, that's reflected in this year's numbers. We have the board is committed to redoing the auditorium, so there's $2.5 million in the purchase services for that. There's the Nest project, so there's some upfront costs between with SHP as well as Conger. Those are currently in the purchase services contract. So a number of these items, we also did, the past couple of years, we also did high school roofs in 4 of the elementaries, so those are in there. So when you look at the forecasting and you look at purchase services, there's a significant increase for this year. It goes down slightly in '24, and then it goes down again in '25. And that, the reason being is because of these paying off these capital projects. So when we look at expenses from fiscal year '22, again, being a school district, the vast majority of our expenses are going to be in the area of salaries and benefits. As you can see, 74% of our costs comes from salaries and benefits. Again, we don't produce a product, we teach. So that's why the vast majority of our expenses there. 20% is purchase services. Again, that's as a result of the capital outlay and the transportation. And then supplies and materials, capital outlay and other expenditures are 3%, 1%, and 2%. So when we look at the forecast, again, personal services that's strictly salaries, and based what I mentioned earlier about the union contracts that will increase. Employee retirement benefits, purchase services, you can see there, the 18 million, 16, and the 15. As I mentioned, supplies, materials, and other revenues, we typically, in the past, I've typically estimated about a 3% increase. Given what we're seeing with things, I did increase that to about a 4% annual increase. The other item in supplies and materials, we did increase that an additional $300,000 because of what we're seeing in fuel costs. I believe right now, compared to last year, we're about $160,000 additional in fuel, simply fuel costs of where we see diesel at. So as we look at this graph, at the top half of the graph, the red line represents the expenses that the history as well as what's being projected into the future. The blue line is revenues. So as you can see, revenues over time are pretty flat. However, we do end up, we ended up going into last year, which will continue to be is budgeted, is that we were in a point where on an annual basis, expenditures have exceeded revenues. Therefore, that's eaten into our cash balance. So that green line represents the district's cash balance moving forward. At the end of June of 2027, it's projected there's about $2.2 million at the end of that month, simply because of where things are headed. So, any questions?
Brian, it's been 9 years, is that correct?
2013, since the last levy.
Since we
Yes.
passed a levy.
Mm-hmm.
How was our district able to make that levy stretch? Because it's my understanding that it's normal every 3, sometimes 4 years for most public schools, and ours stretched for 9.
Right.
There had to have been some decisions made for that, and I was just wondering if you could shed some light on that.
Sure. Obviously, expenditure controls helps with that. But one of the biggest factors is the state funding formula. Typically, what we have seen is anytime there's a change of governor, they change the funding formula, and that's no different. That's why we got the new funding formula last year. Every time in the past they've changed that funding formula, Milford has benefited significantly because of that change. This time, we did not. We're not expected to see those big increases in state funding that we have in the past. What the state does is the state looks at one of the key drivers in the state funding beyond student enrollment is property values. And at the state level, Milford is considered a high wealth district. Therefore, the state feels that the district can take on more of that burden than other districts. So over the past several years, again, the state funding formula has benefited us. This one, not so much.
And the same governor coming back for another 4-year term.
Yeah. And one of the things with this funding formula, in the funding formula, there's always been, not just this one, but in years past, there's always been what they refer to as a guarantee. And what the guarantee does is if you have a drop in property values or you have a significant drop in student enrollment, what they've always done is they guarantee you that in this funding formula case in 21, we won't drop below what they funded us in 21. So we are currently on that guarantee. This funding formula was supposed to correct that. However, of the 612 districts in the state of Ohio, there's over 400 districts that are currently on that guarantee. So the formula clearly isn't doing what it was supposed to do. So I wouldn't be surprised within the next year or so, there's another proposal out there for a different funding formula. But no guarantees because they do it on a 2-year annual basis. Biennial basis, I should say.
And the elephant in the room is the green line there, which definitely indicates that there's a levy a-coming.
True.
So if no one, if anyone in the community hasn't heard that, they haven't been listening, but it's coming. It'll be probably in the next year. We'll
Yeah,
be
and
doing that.
that's been talked about going back to when we ran the bond issue, is that a new levy was going to be coming fairly
And
after.
we told them, if I remember correctly, Mr. Spicer, we told them if this passes, or if it doesn't pass, 2 years, we're going to be coming back with a levy.
We did say that. There's a good chance of that. And if I could just add to Mr. Rabe's commentary, for those that are listening and our board members, contact Jean Schmidt. She works for you. She works for us. I have lobbied with her, told her that the fair funding formula does not fix it. And so I would just ask that you reach out to her. She was just reelected. And we have to lobby those folks because depending upon the wealth of people's property value is not the way to fund schools. It's been unconstitutional for over 20 years. It's time.
And what you learn in public schools that are funded this way, and I'm sure all of you were watching the presentation, our revenue stream is relatively fixed, meaning we can't go sell more stuff like most businesses to drive more money to pay for our stuff. And I'm using stuff and that word purposefully. We don't have a product that we can turn a sales and marketing engine on and go sell more. So when you see our property values inch up over time, those are natural things that happen in a lot of communities, especially a community like ours. They don't skyrocket 20%. Our costs continue to do this, but our revenues oftentimes can't keep up with our costs. So the lever that we can pull as a board and administration is try to keep our arms around the escalation of costs, because we know that the revenues are pretty fixed. And we just took a hit with this new funding formula in the fact that our revenues we used to get more money from the state, and we don't get as much anymore. So we have to pay even more attention to the costs associated with running and delivering an excellent education in this community. And we talk about it regularly. Can we do this for less and deliver the same or even better quality of education? And we talk about it regularly. When I see that green line, it's disturbing, I think, for all of us, and we're going to keep working really hard to keep our costs as absolute as low as we can, and the unfortunate inevitability is we're going to be heading back out to the taxpayers. I didn't realize it had been 9 years. That seems like a pretty long time after hearing that it's typically 3 to 4. But as I sit in the Finance Committee, as I learn more and more about how revenues come in and how expenses start adding up, I'm just going to continue to commit, and I think all of us here continue to commit to try to keep our costs in line. I'm not a big fan of taxation, if anyone doesn't realize that. If you are, thank you, because I'm not. So I'll continue to press hard there. But I just wanted to share that, and it's why I asked Brian the difference in the two, because I think it's important, and we're going to be openly discussing this over the next few months, just to make sure that everyone understands how we're funded, especially, and then how we spend money. It's a difficult situation, candidly.
I wanted to reiterate what John said. Am I on? That Columbus says no districts, especially Milford, you're wealthy, you are responsible for paying for it on your own. And the only way we will get that changed is if we talk to our Gene Schmitz and our Mike DeWines and the people who are in charge of making the budget and putting education as a priority. Because our district deserves, all the schools deserve to fund education.
And as we discussed in the finance meeting, I feel like within the next probably 30 days, we're going to have some form of work session where we'll be discussing how we're moving forward with levies and amounts and things like that. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Thank you. Next 3 items for approval. First item being the 5-year forecast and the assumptions, the donation from the Boyd E. Smith PTO, and a transfer of funds from OHSAA account to the athletic account.
Okay, we need a motion to approve items 3, 4, and 5 in the financial section of your agenda.
So moved. Second.
Discussion.
Obviously, we'll now that the forecast, we will submit that up to the state. You can view anybody's 5-year forecast across the state. It's all located on ODE's website, if you want to look at that. As far as the donation is concerned, I'd like to thank the Boyd PTO. Just a couple items that's in your packet. They did use Greg Hill with H&H Homes. The total price of that construction was $86,600. So just wanted to point that out for the recognition of them. And then the final item is the transfer of funds. The OHSA account, this is something that several years ago, the Auditor of State recommended or dictated that any money that we do for hosting tournaments has to go into this fund. But at the time, we sold the tickets, we collected the money, we paid the refs. Because OHSA has changed that, now all the tickets are done electronically, they pay the refs. What they basically said is any money, the auditors now said, any money you got in this account, you need to get it out of the account and close the account. So we're asking for you, because this money was generated by athletics, the approval is to move the money into the athletics account. That's the reason for the transfer.
And this money is from previous years, correct?
We typically do this every year, so this is last year's money that year and a half money. Because I think soccer and baseball from 2 years ago, we didn't transfer yet. Last year's money and then this. Okay. But then obviously we charge OHSA a rental fee for the fields and stuff like that. But
we basically go to zero in this account, never to have any money in it again, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just a reconciliation.
Right.
Accounting update, and from here forward.
Exactly.
It's not on the ledger, so.
You got it.
Okay.
You know, one other comment. I make it a point when somebody does something nice at the end of the meeting, but I'm not gonna wait until that on, and you'll hear it again, but you're gonna hear it now. The Boyd E. Smith PTO, $86,600, none of it taxpayer dollars. They're doing a great job. I've seen that, I saw that building when it was under construction. I was over there for first day of school. It's an amazing facility, and I see out of the corner of my eye that their principal is going to want to make a little comment here. So I will open the mic up to her, but it's another thing that these groups don't get much light of day, if you will. We need to give them the light of day because they are carrying some of the load that allows us to go 9 years on a levy. So we need to recognize them whenever they can. Again, I say this and I'll say it again at the end of the meeting, no taxpayer dollars, all private donations. So it's a wonderful thing to have people like that.
Yes, absolutely. So,
Button on top.
all right, there we go. So yes, I do want to really quickly take a moment to thank our PTO, our families, our students, our members of the community from the past and the present to help us achieve this goal. Boyd E. Smith has such a special campus, and this new outdoor learning center really just helps to expand the learning opportunities for our students. Our students loved watching it being built over these last few months, and they've already loved taking their learning outside under the new structure. So we look forward to the many lessons and memories to come in our amazing new outdoor space. And we also received a grant to help finance the seating for all of our students under that outdoor learning structure. So that's really exciting. We can't wait to have that as well. So thank you. It was officially $10,000 saved. Mrs. Fox, would you like to come up and add anything else?
Guest speaker.
The grant was actually Jana Beal, our treasurer. She founded and connected with them and wrote up a grant for us, and it was a $10,000 grant that we can use for the structure, the building materials themselves, and then with the money that we saved with that, then we're going to buy the seating for the classroom. Well, it's a learning center, not a classroom, sorry. Oh, and then we partnered with the Zimmerman family. Let me look it up. It's a roofing company, and they are providing the leaf guard for the gutter system. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I wasn't prepared for that one.
I'm sorry, it just came to mind that they
I know.
came out to measure our
Let me look. I forget his name. Heather's going to be so mad at me.
We are very excited
Yes.
about the
I will let you guys know. But yes, we had 2 nice donations on top of the money that was raised. So we appreciate the community and their support.
Any other comments? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to the next section of the meeting, superintendent's business. Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. This evening's middle school update, just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all of our community and staff members that took part of our engagement the past several months. We did recently receive some estimates from Conger Construction and SHP, our architects. Those estimates are high. It's not a surprise to anyone. As we all know, the construction prices have increased significantly over the last 2 years. According to OFCC, the price increase is about 18% over the last 2 years, which translates to about $49.40 per square foot. So we anticipated this going into our schematic design, and originally had planned for 225,000 square feet. Jeff kept us on track to reduce that square footage with the idea that inflation was going to hit us pretty hard. We got that square footage down to 206,787 square feet. So we did reduce that significantly, hoping that that would be enough cushion. So right now, OFCC has a manual that says that there is a minimum of what something could look like or should look like, or the product, and there's good, better, and best. There's going to be a whole lot of good at this new middle school because of that. So we're going to have to continue to sit down with them, look at value engineering, look at things that we can reduce. We can't reduce the scope of the work, which would be reduce classrooms. So we're going to continue to do that, work with them. But I think it's fair to say that there's a good potential that this could be upwards of 10%, bless you, 10% over. And so we will continue to work with them, Conger and SHP at this time. We have moved on to DD, which is design development documents. And so that's where we are. I'm really proud of our team, proud of our principals, athletic directors, Jeff, my team, myself, just coming together and really taking a hard look at what this building is going to be. And so at the end of the day, inflation is really killing us right now. So just a little foreshadow of what may be to come. That's the middle school update.
Any questions or comments?
I'll just say, Jeff, thanks for digging in and trying to keep us on track here. For anyone that understands how these things work, being on time and under budget is always a challenge in any construction project, especially one of this size. Fast forward a year or two from the original pricing that was quoted, and we've seen substantial increases in costs. And it's just frustrating to be on that side of the decision, or on that side of the build, because they're able to get $50 extra square feet, and we can't raise our prices to cover it. Again, as I alluded to before, our revenues are pretty static with our real estate taxes. So, Jeff, you're going to keep working hard to try to get that as low as we possibly can and as close to what we possibly can with budget, because that's what we agreed to do. And I just want to tip the cap and say thanks for getting our square footage as low as you can, and keep challenging them on various materials, because good, better, best, we're at the state minimum with a lot of this. So that's the comment I had, Dave.
Anyone else? We may get a little relief from the state, but it's not going to put a big dent in what we've got. Yeah.
Yeah, there is the potential for us to go back to FCC and say, look, we're at the minimums on everything, and can we get a budget adjustment? Which, if it were to happen, I think it's very important to know that, their portion is less than 30%. So it would be 30% of what the overage is. It's not, any money is great, but it's not what you might think it could be. But I'll let Jeff speak a little more to that.
Well, my light's red, so I don't know how long this is going to last. Yeah, as Mr. Spicer alluded to, if there's a budget adjustment by the state, it would be to cover 27% of the co-funded amount. We've got a fairly significant LFI that we budgeted on this project for site circulation and parking, as well as putting the sixth graders in the middle school. So anything that's an LFI, we're on the hook for 100%. At budget, over budget, under budget, we're on the hook for an LFI 100%. And there's no guarantees The state has been giving budget adjustments on other projects, but again, that would only be on the 27% of the co-funded amount. The only other thing I wanted to add, this is very much a process. This is not over. We're continuing to work it. We're continuing to work with SHP, with Conger. We're in the process of setting up meetings with our teachers and our staff as part of the design development process that'll happen after Thanksgiving, so they'll get input as to, what goes on inside the classroom. But again, we're stuck with the design manual minimum, and the ability to go above and beyond that really doesn't exist unless we want to put a bunch of extra money into it, and I know that's not what anybody wants to do. So, we also want to build a building that we're going to be happy to live with for the next 50, 60 plus years, long after all of us are gone. So, there'll be some tough decisions here in the coming months, but it is very much a process that we're going to continue working very, very hard on.
Okay, let's move on.
Thank you, Jeff. Before we move on, I did get the name Chris Zimmerman, at your service, roofing and remodeling. Call anytime. I have two other items under superintendent's business. I have number 2 and number 3, policies for approval, second reading, and a policy to rescind the second reading.
There is no vote on that at this point, right?
Correct.
Correct, okay. Well,
Well, no, the policies for approval
I'm sorry.
needs a reading.
There's no motion yet.
there is no motion.
Yeah, so you need a motion.
I
to
need a
approve these.
motion to accept those. Okay,
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, I need a motion to accept item 2 and item 3, policies for approval and policies to rescind.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to the Human Resource Business section of our meeting, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. Under Human Resources, I do have 4 items for you: certified, exempt, classified, and supplemental approvals.
Okay, I need a motion to approve items 1 through 4.
So moved. Second?
Discussion.
I would ask that you take a close look at 3 classified. Number 4, Mr. Terry Pell, a custodian with the district for 44 years, is going to retire in May. So we'd like to congratulate Terry for all of his years of service and being with us.
I've seen those preschool bathrooms. That's some work.
That's an extremely long time of service.
Thank you, Mr. Pell.
Okay, any other discussion? Let's call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Now move on to curriculum instruction. Once again, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda. Members of the board, under curriculum instruction, curriculum and instruction, number 1, approval of curriculum pay.
Okay, we need a motion to approve item number 1, approval of curriculum pay for the individuals listed here.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, under item 2, I do have a presentation for the board and the community. I heard earlier the board and Mr. Rabe say that we're not making widgets. We don't make a product here. We have students, and our business is growing students, and that's what we do. So I have asked Mr. Jared Minderman, who is a teacher on assignment here at Milford, to go through the ins and outs of what value added is, what exactly he does for us, and talk a little bit about our growth and our growth goal for our students going into next year and our stretch goals as well.
Yeah, so my name is Jared Benjamin. I'm a teacher assignment. The title would be an MPSS. That's short for multi-tiered systems of support. Really, it's just to support teachers in the many different aspects of teaching and growing students. So. Okay, is that better? Oh, okay. I was like, this is a quiet mic. Yeah, so this is my presentation. I really like this quote, so I put it on the title page. We are surrounded by data, but starved for insights. I find this to be very true in education. In education, we create data all the time. Pretty much everything that a student does, every action, every assignment is data. The part that is difficult is interpreting that data. So that is kind of one of the ways that I work to support the district. So go to the first slide. Yeah, so the main thing that I'm going to be talking to you guys tonight about is EVOS, and I have the definition on the next slide of what EVOS is short for, so we'll get to that. But this is just EVOS 101, and we're going to talk about these four main questions that will kind of help you get a better understanding of what EVOS is and how we can use it to set goals for our district academically, and how we can strive to grow all of our students, which is really what it's about. So we can jump in. So what is EVOS? EVOS is short for Educational Value Added Assessment System. I will just call it EVOS from here on out. But it is a advanced statistical modeling done by a company that is contracted by the Department of Education in Ohio, but also many other Department of Educations across the nation. And what they do is they take the state test data from all the schools, so the OST and then the end of course exams, and they apply their statistical model that they can give us some really strong numbers on how students grow from year to year in comparison to other students in the state, and it can give us things like expected growth, so how much we would expect a student to grow based on how things are going in the state of Ohio, essentially, because it's updated year to year. So I wanted to point out specifically this the second paragraph, which is that in general, education policy historically at local and at national levels has really focused on proficiency-based goals, and I advocate against those type of goals and more focused on growth-based goals. And the reason being is if you set a proficiency goal and that is what you are focused on, is achieving that proficiency goal. And I think if you set a goal, that you should be striving to achieve that goal, and you should be taking actions to achieve that goal. So if you set a proficiency goal, me as a data person would be in a position where I would have to advise to best meet that goal. And you would do that with a proficiency-based goal by looking at the students that would be close to proficient. Students that would be above proficient, you wouldn't be as motivated to push as hard because they're already above proficient, and you have a proficiency-based goal. And your students who are struggling students, who are more than a year's worth of growth behind, there is not a large incentive to work as hard to support their growth either, if your academic goal is based on proficiency. So the task is to find a goal that supports all students and supports the growth of all students. And to me, a growth-based goal where everyone can be a part of that goal and everyone can contribute to that goal is a good place to start. So that's why we look at this value added, because the state of Ohio and the Department of Education has entered this contract with this company, and they've been doing this for many years, but it's something that we haven't looked at before in leveraging, is this looking at how all of our students grow. So And additionally, focusing on student growth actually does promote proficiency, and it promotes growth for all students. And over time, if you're focused on growth and all students growing, lots of students will get to proficient. But you have to take the right journey, and growth is looking at the journey, where just a proficiency goal is looking at the destination. And I'm looking to be far more concerned with the journey of how we are growing our kids. So if we go on to the next slide. How is growth measured? So I keep talking about growth, but it would be important for you to know how that growth is measured. So the idea is that they take the state test that you took the year prior, and they look at where each individual student ended, and then they map that onto. They take all the students in the state of Ohio into a big pot, and then they map it onto a standard curve. I don't want to get too much into the statistics side of things. I want to keep it entertaining for you guys. But essentially, they map it onto a curve, and most people should be familiar with the idea of a percentile. If for nothing else, going to the doctor's office, right? If you hear about a baby in the 60th percentile, like me, I was a chunky baby, so I was in the 90th percentile. But that is what kind of they do. They put them on a student on a percentile of their performance, and then they calculate out 1 year of expected growth based on normal circumstances. This is what we would expect a typical student to grow, and then that growth would be 0.0. And I have a case study on the next slide that will explain why. They give you a better understanding of why 0.0 is not a bad thing. You hear zero growth, but those things don't compute like in a traditional setting. And we'll see even negative, where we certainly don't strive for a negative number in growth. It doesn't mean a loss of learning. That's the important thing to remember, that it doesn't mean a loss of learning. It would be, these are made up numbers, but if a company, right, say like Ford or something, is saying their expected revenue would be, I'm making up numbers here, so forgive me, I'm not a business person, like $12 billion, right? And they earned $10 billion in revenue. That would be, in these terms, that would be considered a negative, that would be a negative number in that, because they're looking for expected growth to be 0.0. Anything above expected growth of a year's worth of growth is above that number. So that's kind of just a quick description of growth. We're on the next slide. This is the case study that I was talking about. So 3 examples here, and this is pretending that we have 3 children going to the doctor's office, right? These are going to be 3 boys in this example, and these are real percentiles based on the CDC. So we see these 3 boys. They all entered their 2-year checkup, their 24-month checkup, at 28.1 pounds. This child, 1 year later, went up in weight to 31 pounds, but their percentile went down, right? And so they went from the 50th percentile to the 41st percentile. So in this example, their growth score was -9 because they went from the 50th percentile down to the 41st, despite having grown weight. The second example, going from the 28.1 pounds to 31.8 pounds, kept you at the 50th percentile. So that would be that expected growth, that expected year growth, that would keep them at 0.0. And then if you have a child who also gained weight, but above the 50th percentile up to the 53rd, you'd see a 3.0. So just a visual on how all 3 of these children went up in weight. One of them had a negative growth score, one had a growth score of 0.0, and one had a positive growth score. So on to the next slide. How can the results be interpreted? So how can they be interpreted? Students, we are looking at academic growth of the student, so we are looking for, we can look at individual students, we can see their individual growth. I don't recommend just looking at the individual student because there are a lot of confounding variables. The teacher is the constant, but there are lots of variables that can happen in life, other life circumstances, right? If there's tragedy in the family, or if you're talking about like someone who moved in the middle of a year, things like that. those things can impact individual growth. But when you start to get larger and larger numbers, you see a lot more stability in the growth. And the larger the sample size, the more likely it is to be closer to 0.0 because their model is very predictive of where kids will end up in a year. It does a very good job of predicting it. That's why I'm comfortable looking at the model, and why the state of Ohio and a lot of other Department of Educations have worked with this statistical model, because it's pretty predictive. So the larger the sample size, the more likely the growth is to be at 0.0. So if we go to the next one, this is probably the most important information, is how does EVOS support student progress, right? How does looking at student growth impact student progress? And this is kind of the work that I am fortunate enough to get to do with our teachers, is getting into the rooms with teachers during their valuable plan time and talking to them about these things, like these really hard things, because teaching is very personal. And you can have had an amazing year teaching students, and then you get your growth score and it's at expected. And you felt like you moved mountains with those kids, and you did, but we're always looking to grow our students more. So I'm supporting finding ways to look at data to support this data as well as lots of other data. I never am trying to look at one piece of data. You're trying to blend all of the data together and figure out how we can support our student growth. So we're looking at things like, are there areas that we succeed with growing our students in? And what we see is we have in Milford, and I'm sure everywhere, you have pockets of students that you work really well with and that your curriculum supports. And there are other pockets of students that you might need to supplement because you might not be reaching them all the same. An area for us in lots of places and lots of other districts is chronically absent students. So our students who attend less school on average. And there is still ways to reach those kids. And we actually have positive growth with those kids still, which is an amazing testament to our teachers that they get less time with the students and they're still positively growing those kids, but not at the same rate which we grow other kids. So we look to support those. We put systems in place to support those. That's that multi-tiered systems that I'm talking about. We also look at how we can establish new practices. So it's looking at how what I can do to support teachers in building new practices, because a lot of it is, as a teacher, you do not have a ton of time to try new things, because you're teaching every single day. And the time to grow as a teacher is a very narrow window daily when you're planning, but then also during our in-services and in our work days throughout the year. So supporting teachers in that is one of the things I do as well. So if we go on to the next slide. This slide wasn't still in it, thank you. So the district academic goal. So I supported our district team in coming up with our academic goal based on growth. And so what you'll see in this chart is we have two areas to focus, and that is our math, and in our math 5 through 9, so our 5th grade students through 9th grade students taking their math test, and then our English language arts 4 through 8, and then it says and ELA 2 because it's not a defined grade always that you're taking that ELA 2. But that's and of course at the high school. So I have our growth average, and then our goals for our goal and our stretch goal for 22-23. We actually see that we have in 2022 we had a growth, a district growth of that combined of 5 through 9 of 0.71, which is a really good. We had a very good year with growing our math students, which is also needed because they are, our proficiency numbers are not as high. So we need to continue to push for that years like this where we have really good growth. And then in our ELA, we ended up with negative 0.35, which again, as a reminder, does not say that there was loss of learning or regression. It just means that compared to the state, we made slightly less growth than expected. So a couple of key points with this when considering this district academic goal. larger sample sizes of data, it pushes towards 0. So you're really operating between when you're looking at district level data, you're kind of operating between a -2 and a +2 is like really, is the range of of what you can achieve. Individual growth is much more susceptible to a variety of outside factors. We kind of talked about that. And just to give you an idea, the district math growth goal was made up of 1,856 individual student growth scores. And the ELA was made up of 2,812 individual growth scores. So you're talking about lots and lots of scores, and the more data you have, the closer it regresses back to the mean number of this 0.0 expected growth. So that is why we are not seeing these really high numbers. At the individual level, you can see I was meeting with a teacher today, actually, and there was a student who was plus 25 growth. And she said, like, that kid, it clicked for him, right? And then there was another kid who went on vacation after the first day of the test. So they took the first part of the test and not the second part of the test. I counted their score. So that kid was at -30. So for every kid where there are these numbers, they kind of like, it's like a scale, right? But it is very common that these are, like, the stretch goal of 0.75 is a ambitious goal. And I think it is an accomplishable goal, but it is certainly ambitious. If we go to the next slide, kind of just want to talk about the importance of this work and more speak a little bit about my team and, not my team, but the team I'm a part of and kind of what we do. So I quoted back to this education policy at all levels has historically focused on proficiency, and it has the unintended consequences of focusing on only a pocket of students who are on the cusp of proficiency. And it is certainly the goal of our team and the work of, under the guidance of Linza Davey, that we focus on all students. And that is really an entire district vision is, all means all. And I truly believe that. And as a district, we've never focused on this type of growth data. We've looked very much at proficiency data, not at growth data. So this is hard data to look at. Just in trying to give you guys this this primer on it, this 101 on it, it is complicated work to explain. It takes a lot of understanding. I had taken many graduate courses in statistics to be able to understand and dig into this data, and teachers don't have that training because it isn't an expectation in part of their training. It would be unreasonable to expect teachers to be able to take in these numbers and understand them. So that's partially why I am here to support them in looking at this data in collaboration with other data to draw conclusions and help improve their practice. And we are talking about thousands and thousands of rows of data that they would have to sift through. So that is really one of my jobs, is cleaning that data and making it presentable and making it, doing the data visualization side of it. And we're actually going to get to see a little bit of that right here. So I can't click on it. Oh, right there. Google Data Studio. We click on that. Maybe. Yeah. Can't access report. Okay. I can fix it real quick. I can fix it because I can get access from my phone. So sorry, didn't think of that. Thought I had it all prepared, guys. Try again, refresh. Okay, just like that, we click on that button and now it's up and live. So, so if we hit this arrow to tab it off to the side, this little arrow right here, what we're going to look at here is a lot of the work that I do with teachers. I take all of their spreadsheet row data and I visualize it for them. So I am helping them be able to interact with the data of data analytics is not just me telling them what the data says. That is not as meaningful as them being able to explore through the data and come to their own conclusions and have conversations about it. So this is the district value added. This is how we got our goals. When I visualized it for you guys, the process that I went through. But if we scroll down, and you see this right here. So this is each of the grade levels, the number of students that contribute to the score, and then it funnels into that district average. So this is for ELA. So what we see is each of the individual scores. So 5th grade math was at negative 4.74. 6th grade was at 0.86. Read the rest of the numbers, 6.1, 4.0. And then if we scroll down as well, this is this kind of talks about the predictive nature of what EVOS does and the value added. So if we look at each of these columns, you see limited, basic, proficient, accomplished, advanced. That is where the student, the group of students was projected to score. And then if you actually look at the color of the bar, so it goes red, yellow, green, blue, purple. But where they color on the bar, that's how they actually scored. So it's expected is the bottom, and then how they scored is is actually in the bar colored. So, limited, 229 of them were projected to score limited and scored limited. 50 of them scored the next category up. Another 15 of them scored 2 categories up, and then 1 of them scored 3 categories up. So we can see that for each of them. So you can see often the largest pocket of students met their expected score, right? Which is what we would expect because this model is predictive of how students perform. Some students overperform and some students underperform. But so that is just kind of a visualization of how our students shook out. So we have the same thing for ELA. So if we click on number 2, so this is for English language arts. We have their numbers, their growth numbers here. Yep. And then it feeds into an overall number, and then we have their performance compared to expectation. So this is just a sample of how I'm how I'm supporting taking large Excel spreadsheets of numbers and turning them into something that teachers can visualize and interact with. So I'll give you one sample of the interaction. If we go up to the very top, and you click on that little red pie chart in the chronically absent, what this is going to do, yep, you can click on it. So this is going to look at the growth. It's going to update the table or the entire dashboard, and it's going to scroll. If we scroll down, it's going to show us the growth of our chronically absent students. So we can explore these subgroups. Right? In real time, we can explore these subgroups, and we can investigate the data together. So it's saying, we remember the district number was negative 0.35. For all of our students. If we just look at our chronically absent students, it's negative 1.18. And then we can do the opposite if we go up and we click on the green for chronically absent instead of so these are our students who we get to come in. Our growth number goes up. So we can find areas where we perform better with students in areas that we don't perform strongly. So that is kind of a primer into EVOS and in value added, and using growth to set goals to grow our students and to help them reach higher.
Thank you, Jared.
Yes.
Question?
Yep.
Okay, I spent time in the regular committee meeting. We spent about an hour afterwards doing this, and I've gone through it again for a 3rd time here. My takeaway on this is if you are plus 0.71, you've moved the needle 71/100ths of a percent.
A percentile. Yep.
Percentile,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So if you're a 1.0, you've moved from 50% to 51%.
Correct.
Percentile.
So because we have so many students in here,
Mm-hmm.
you don't move the needle by 5 percentile, 10 percentile for that group. And we wouldn't expect, or I'm not sure this isn't exactly correctly said, but I'm not sure we want to. We want to move the percentile a little bit for everybody, not just a particular top group.
Correct.
So in essence, we're setting goals for the district to move the needle a 0.5 percentile and a stretch goal of 3/4 percentile. Is that correct?
Correct.
Once I got that, that made a lot more sense for me. So looking at the number, it's very hard for a layman or even in a 20-minute presentation to figure it out. So I thought I'd give my 2 cents worth and get confirmation on it. So
I appreciate that it only felt like 20 minutes. I do.
Any other questions?
Oh, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Melissa. No.
I do have some more questions on this, and I was also in the committee meeting on this. And I know you say you want to focus on, I know Lindsay mentioned this, you have to focus on each kid, right? We want to help each kid grow from where they are, whatever, if they're chronically absent or if they're, whatever their thing is, you want to help each kid grow. But if we're only looking at it as a overall group, how do we reach those individual kids?
In the classroom.
In the classroom.
That happens in the classroom. That's what the teacher's doing. They're working their magic.
So at what point do we look at the individuals and say, are you growing, and by what metric are we looking at those? Like, so I'm going to go off of a graph that was posted at a board meeting about a year ago, and it was proficiencies. So this was comparing the spring of 2018 to the spring of 2019 data, and I'll use, because you've got 5 through 8 math, so I'll go on that. So 5 through 8 math, I'll go with 7th grade math, had a change on the state report card. We had, let's see, 26.4% of the 7th grade math was proficient. 26.4. That meant 73.6% of the people taking 7th grade math were not proficient. And so how do we look at like that age, that group, which would now be like 2 years past, now that'd be the 9th grade group, to see, where they fall in statistics. Like, hopefully we still don't have 73.6% not proficient. So how are we breaking that down to look at, did that group grow? Instead of looking at as one big bubble, like looking at the groups where they were and where they are to see if there's growth.
Sure. So another chart that we can put up, another chart that that I do include at the classroom level and the school level is the percent of students who met or exceeded their expected growth. So we could see the actual percentage of our student population that met or exceeded their expected growth. So that would be 0.0 or higher. So that could be a way to gauge that at the district and individual level. The presentation that I just gave was to talk about. I definitely hear your point, and I agree with it, because we are looking at growing each and every kid. That's we are in agreement in that, certainly.
Because I just think, like, here we've got statistics from 2 years ago. We should be able to pull out that same group, which would now be the 9th grade math, and say, like, how are they faring compared to how they did to assess growth?
Correct. So those students were on that dashboard as 9th grade students. Look, we saw their growth number. We did not look at their proficiency number there. I'm not familiar specifically with that table and everything that goes into that table. It would be something that I would have to look at rather than just hearing the number once. So I apologize for that.
No, that's okay.
Paul's going to answer that question for her because he knows the answer.
So overall, if we go by that data, those students that were in 7th grade, if they're in Algebra 1, as a cohort, they made the most. Students made more progress than expected with significant evidence. If we go to geometry, if they are seventh grader who didn't do so well and now they're in geometry, students made progress similar to the statewide expectation. And that's in the report card, readily available to the public. They break down each of the roughly 20 tests, and then they'll tell us in one of those 5 categories. Students made less progress than expected, students made less progress than expected, so red and yellow are sort of the same. Students made progress similar to the statewide expectation is green. Students made more progress than expected. And then in algebra, students made more progress than expected, significant evidence, so highest category.
And would those numbers be equal to that middle group? Would they be like equal to a 0.0% growth like Mr. Minderman was just showing us, or not necessarily?
I mean, they're going to be much
big
higher than a
apples
0.0 because they were all the way in the highest category. Which, Jared, the deep blue is, do you remember what it was? 3.0 or higher. And then if you take an aggregate of every test and every data point, the district was light blue, which means students made more progress than expected with moderate evidence, which would put us at 4 out of 5 stars.
To further dig into your point, which is how do we address proficiencies, because proficiency does still matter.
Well, yeah, so like how do we take a group, like when we're looking at all of this data in growth and stuff, how do we specifically look at, hey, here's this group of kids that did like this, and now they're like, now they're doing this, and hopefully that's an improvement. So,
Yes.
going back to this data that was presented this time last year, we all agreed in the committee meeting, math has not been a focus, and now John is making it a focus. So that's positive growth for the district. But how do we really look and see if a grade level as a whole is improving?
Right, so there's two parts to that. One being looking at the growth number. I promise you I'm not avoiding your question.
No, you're fine.
Part one of that is looking at the growth number, and if in a long-term project, we have not looked at growth, but as part of a long-term project, if you have positive growth every year, the idea is that the proficiency numbers will get better and better over time also. But two, to answer that question, you could also take that group of students in 7th grade and just do a comparison to 9th grade. That is something you could do as well. Now, you're talking about 8th grade, 7th grade or 8th grade, they are topic tests, and then 9th or geometry or algebra is a single subject. So a little bit comparing apples to oranges, but as far as proficiency goes, I understand what you're saying, and those are just numbers that we could pull. I don't have them off the top of my head. Not that good, unfortunately. But those would just be numbers that we can pull. And the idea is that we are looking at multiple sources of data. It was in one of my slides, I promise. It said this data in essentially this data and other data, right? We are looking at this. We are also looking at proficiency. I think I said in the C&I meeting that proficiency does still matter because it is something that the state looks at. So we have to also consider it, and also it is part of what the state sets, right? They set a proficiency target. So I think that growth is a better way of going about it, because specifically the tail ends get overlooked, like our students who struggle most and our students who succeed most in that academic setting, which is just one setting which you can struggle or succeed in. But in that setting, those groups get overlooked when we are just talking about proficiency, because some of those kids will never get to proficient as much as...
Right, but as long as they're growing, even if they are in the like if you have a student that's in the limited group, as long as they're growing in the limited group, like
Correct.
everyone should be progressing
Correct.
in their own,
Yes, and that is what we are
in their own path.
working at doing we're shifting the focus to that and making sure that we are growing kids year over year. And that we are looking at all the students, because in the past we have, with using proficiency-based goals, you just ignore the tail ends on both sides.
I want to tell you how much I appreciate this work. This has been an age-old argument inside of education. How do we really measure the quality of our education? And if it's only proficient, you're losing on both ends, the top performers and the underperformers, and you're teaching to a test. And that is exactly what No Child Left Behind, and then you pull No Child Left Behind policies out, and now how do we know if we're doing good or not? So there has to be some sort of way that we are measuring the quality of our education and the growth of these kids. So I applaud it. A couple of my questions, you don't have to answer now because you weren't prepared to get grilled yet. But I'd love to have a meeting, because I don't understand how standards of excellence are defined without proficiency. You just told me that proficiency is still a part of the equation, because I think it needs to be, but the growth measures I think are fantastic. Now the teachers feel like they probably have a chance with the hand that they're dealt, because they're dealt a lot of different cards in these classrooms. And now if you can measure growth, the aggregate is important at district levels, but I think to Ms. Nolan's point, we need to understand how an individual improvement plan can be carved out of some of this data as well, regardless where you're at on the spectrum. Right?
Absolutely.
If you're a super top performing child and the standard of growth for that child is X based on the mean of the aggregate data, is that really a fair standard? You don't have to answer it now. I'd love to talk to you about it.
I will say part of the what goes into the calculations is you're not getting compared. Your number is also calculated because they have such a large sample size. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of students per grade level. They can also put you in what they call like their state achievement groups, and so you're getting a expected growth number compared to other students who are performing at a similar level.
Yeah.
So our highest like performing students, it's really hard to measure if you're comparing them to the whole population. It's really hard to measure growth, because if you're in the 99th percentile, to go to the 99.9 percentile is, but when you are looking at, if you just look at then that group of students, you can start to look at growth in a different way.
So the data set's rich enough for you to get a meaningful comparison to likely proficient children. My comment was, we're starting to chip away at this problem, and I applaud it. So thank you. I have some more questions, not for you tonight, but I think it's good work. I hope we never get away from proficiency, and I think it's amazing that we're starting to measure growth. I think that is a fantastic piece of progress for educators, candidly. So, yeah.
We've always measured growth. It's just a matter of, when I say always, not always, but for a long time. But we are just now, we're digging into this data. It then translates into the building, which then translates into the classroom. So the magic happens inside the classroom. That's where the teachers work with students, and they're growing all kids. And that's what's really important. I think, as I think back at some of the other comments, math has always been a priority in this district. I'm not making it a priority. It's been a priority for eons, and so are all the other subjects. We're making this data a priority and looking at this type of data a priority, and I think that's what I want the board to know and the community to know, is that we're trying to grow all of our kids, because at the end, 97% of our kids graduate with a diploma. As Paul says, we're not a diploma factory. They're going to get there one way or another. So if they don't make it there with their 5th grade math or their 7th grade math, they're going to get there by the time they're a senior, and I think that's what's important. And ultimately, I think our product is, it speaks for itself.
Speaking to the state report card, I will just say something very shortly, but it's flawed in a lot of different ways. I think, much to Jerry's point, you want to be able to say, here's a benchmark we can compare everyone to, But I think how the report card has come together with all the different pieces that don't line up, I don't think it's really ever been a good reflection of where districts shine.
A state report card and the state tests are a direct reflection of your wealth. 100%.
Absolutely.
If you plot it on a chart, Jared, we won't make you do it. You will see high-performing districts are high wealth districts, and that's what it is. It is a direct reflection of your community's wealth. Those tests are. You can contact Gene Schmidt about that as well.
I'll be real quick. I don't want to belabor the point, but I wanted to point out something that Jerry said as well. I really appreciate the district's commitment to taking this data and really taking it seriously and looking at these growth-based goals. I was in Mr. Minderman's presentation to the curriculum committee, and I was really impressed with how much goes into this, how much we're really working with the teachers, and how much we really are like trying to support all students and going with that Milford means all. I feel like things in education are constantly improving, and this is something that our district is taking to heart. A lot of other districts in the area are focused on that proficiency score, and that we're focused on growth, I think really says a lot about our district.
And coming out of industry and having a little chance with some one-on-one time with Jared to kind of test drive this and play with it a little bit, there are so many ways you can slice and dice it. You can ask a question, you can get an answer. It's going to take some clicking of some boxes to get a group together, but you can get to the answer that you want. And you can look at progress. You can look at it by a single student if you wanted to. You can look at it by a classroom. You can look at it by a grade level. You can look at it across the whole school. So there are a lot of things you can find here, and that's going to be helpful. We just, with all data, you just need to try to figure out what you want and what makes sense. Then you go after it and you dive in and you can find it. I did this in my previous job before I came on the board. So it's...
Your opening slide had the most compelling statement about we have a lot of data, but where's the insight? And, you know, actionable insight is what's driving improvements in every walk of life. So, again, thanks for the effort. I'll spend some more time with you. I think it'd be helpful. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
I think my final comment would be, you know, we talked about a product earlier. We're not making widgets. You know, if you get a bad case of blueberries and you're a pie maker, you can send those blueberries back. We don't send kids back. We take everybody, and our teachers truly work the magic inside the classroom. And I'm super proud of everything that we do, and we're not running away from proficiency scores. We know where they're not good, and that's why we have Jared, his team, Linza, Rob, Paul, our principals, our teacher leaders within the building, and we're gonna address it. We're not running from it. It's out in the open. Parents aren't keeping their best kids at home. We get them all, and we're glad we get them all.
If that's all, I'm going to go back to my banquet for soccer, so I will see you guys later.
20 more questions, please. No, I'm just...
Thank you, Jared. Okay, let's move on to Board of Education concluding items. First thing on the agenda is public participation.
I do have two. Rebecca Bourne.
Rebecca has left.
Okay. All right. Amanda Fox.
Amanda Fox, 6331 Lake Ridge Court. I just wanted to touch base about the math thing. I feel like, number one, 7th grade math has always been a topic of discussion at various board meetings. My first 7th grader was in 2017. This conversation has been brought up multiple times. First of all, I would like to give a shout out to our 7th grade math teachers. They do an incredible job. And something that this community has talked about for many, many years, and something that I think it's really fair to talk about tonight, is, and having my third son at the junior high right now in 7th grade, I have a very unique position. I have one kid that was in cohort, I have one kid that was in honors, and I have one kid that's in 7th grade math. The district does a really great job with teaching to the individual student. And when I say that, he's a junior now. When he was in 7th grade, he was taking freshman math. My freshman in college, when he was in 7th grade, he was taking 8th grade math. Well, he took 7th and 8th grade math in the same year. And then my 7th grader is taking 7th grade math. So at the end of the year, my freshman in college that was taking a year ahead took the 8th grade math test. His score was taken out of the 7th grade. He was a 7th grader taking an 8th grade math score. My junior was a 7th grader taking a 9th grade math test. His 7th grade test score was put into 9th grade test scores. My 7th grade score will be kept in 7th grade. He is not the top of his class. When we are looking at the 7th grade test scores, we have taken out all of the honors and the cohort kid test scores out. Number one, that is best practice for every student. When we are teaching to the student, that is best practice. We are teaching to the individual student. We're not teaching to a test score that we want to have a fancy report card at the end of the year. I get it, our 7th grade numbers look bad, but when you dive into it and you are saying, I am teaching to the individual student, that is what is important. And if you want a test score, you can make them take a second test score, but I can guarantee you every parent of honors and cohort kid does not want their kid taking 2 math tests at the end of the school year. That is not fair, just so you can have a report card that looks good. We need to continue teaching to the best of our ability for the individual students and not worry about 1 point on a report card that really, whatever. Whatever. We're looking at the individual kids. And I can promise you, my kid that took 8th grade math as a 7th grader, he's a freshman in college. He tested out of his first 3 math classes at NKU. He's doing fine. Milford prepared him. He's doing great. It's going to be okay. They're all going to be okay.
That is it, okay. The next regular board meeting is December 15th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in this room. I guess we're going to go to final board discussion. We've got a tired board here.
Yeah, there's a lot of good news, and we hope it comes in 60 seconds.
Well,
Because we've been here since 5 o'clock.
Never gonna happen.
That's never, first of all, that's never going to happen. But if no one has anything else, I think they might. Go ahead, John.
I think it would be important for you to let the community know, even though there will be a notice that goes out that on November 17th, you will be going into executive session at 5:30 for the purposes of employment of the treasurer. I just obviously just said it, but notice will go out, but it's on camera now.
Okay.
A quick shout. We recognized it earlier, but thank you to all the veterans in this country. Service is greatly appreciated.
I do have one other thing other than the good news report. Tonight we say goodbye to a very important member of this dais here, and Mr. Brian Rabe. He's been here how many years, Brian?
A little over 4.
A little over 4 years. He has taken, accounting-wise, he has taken this district to great heights, and he has just done a wonderful job for us. We're going to miss him, and just like I told Emily, she had big shoes to fill with Dave's job. The next person coming and sitting in that chair has big shoes to fill. So, and on a personal note, Brian, you've gone way above and beyond in mentoring a very green board member and trying to turn him into something that's useful, whether it's Robert's Rules of Order or how we do a bond or how we do a levy. You've always been there. You've always been very patient with me, and I can't say how much I appreciate that. And I'm going to personally miss you, and I have your phone number, so if I have a question, I might still give you a call.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely going to miss it. Yeah.
I'll give updates from Great Oaks.
There you
I'll
go.
see them at those meetings, right?
I'll just piggyback on Dave. Thank you also for all the time that you've spent sitting down and teaching me about all of this.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Emily, you haven't said anything?
I just want to say thank you very much. It's been great working with you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Okay, finally, good news reported is 8:31. Emily,
We have a
should have Brian
3-minute
start the count up.
three-minute timer.
No, don't do that.
He only has 12 seconds left on it.
I can't take the pressure. First, good news. Milford Athletic completed the fall sports season, doing their best to defend the All-Sport Trophy. Current standings are Loveland 70.5 points, Milford 70 points, and Turpin 68, and then the rest of the league is a step below that. So those are the three schools that are going to be competing all the way to the end, and we may have another one slip in there, but right now we are half a point out. So that's a good position to be in. You don't want to be 10 points out trying to make that up in fall and winter. We ended the fall season with one championship. That was the girls soccer, who were here tonight. We had one second place. That was girls volleyball. We had 4 third places, and we had 3 fifth place finishes. So it's a very good year. We were in the top half in every sport that we participated in, and that's outstanding. Girls soccer were the district champs, regional qualifiers, and the team that's going to be competing for the state championship, they split with them, won one and lost one. Boys cross country qualified the team to regionals, qualified one young man to state, and he plays pretty well, and he's a sophomore, so he's only going to come up over the next 2 years. And football played in the state playoffs, won a home playoff game, and then last week were eliminated by Elder in a very good game. They showed themselves very, very well over at the pit. Winter sports start in 2 weeks, so we'll switch out of football and volleyball and soccer and start talking about basketball and wrestling and other sports, swimming. So yesterday I had the opportunity to go to early signing day for our Milford student athletes over at the auditorium. 6 athletes. That's going to be the first of many. I think last year, I believe we had 34 signings over the course of the year. 6 athletes signed yesterday their letters of intent to compete at the collegiate level. The high school drama program presented the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde the last 2 weekends in the high school auditorium, and they had a really, really good turnout for that, and it was a great show. As we talked earlier, I said I'd say it again, and here it is. The new outdoor learning facility at Boyd Smith has been completed and is now in use and will be weather permitting, I guess. When it gets to 10 below zero, we probably will not be out there. Cost of the structure, once again, was $86,600, funded by the Boyd E. Smith PTO, and also they had some other monies coming in to actually buy furniture and things, whether it be a grant or a straight-out donation. No taxpayer dollars were used to build that facility. And it's a really nice facility. If you get a chance, go see it. High school marching band competed in the Band of America competition this afternoon over at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. And Superintendent Spicer, Jenny Berkeley, Rob Dunn, and Paul Daniels were all in attendance. There's a picture of it. Somebody had really good seats there.
It was fantastic. The kids were phenomenal. The energy was palpable. It was pretty cool. It was a great venue.
They had a great show this year, and we wish them the best. Now, dates to remember, tomorrow. The band finds out late in the day whether they're going to get to compete in the semifinals on Saturday. They won't know until probably 9:30, 10 o'clock. So they're going over. They'll already be over there. They are spending the night and they'll be there when the time comes the next day. So if you want to know how they did, watch social media tomorrow night, probably around 10:30. We'll have someone putting something up there for us. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Krista. Okay, on Sunday, Superintendent John Spicer and Assistant Superintendent Jenny Berkeley will be presenting at the OSBA Annual Conference in Columbus, Ohio. They're going to do that Sunday at 2:30, I believe, is the time on that. Their topic is reimagining human capital for today's reality, and they've presented this once already in Houston as kind of a warm-up for OSBA, but to get to present at OSBA is quite an honor. Not everybody gets to do that. Next up, Eagle Madness, Friday, November the 18th. All 14 basketball teams will be represented from 7th grade through 12th over at the high school gymnasium. Probably start about 6 or 6:30, I'm guessing, and we'll go probably till 9 o'clock. A lot of teams, a lot of people to introduce, and they're going to play some basketball. Thanksgiving break is Monday, November the 21st through November the 25th, which is a Friday. That's an entire week off, so it'll give our staff a chance to rest, relax, and recuperate, as well as our students. So no, everybody's looking forward to Thanksgiving. You get a little bit more time there. I think this is the second year we've done that. And the last thing that I have, applause, the annual craft show, Milford Craft Show, will take place on Saturday, December 3rd from 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. Over 200 craft booths spread out across the entire high school. It's a great show over there. It's a great way to start your December holiday season. That's all I have. So, at this point, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
That was quick. Discussion, hearing none. Mr. Rabe, for the last time with this body, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you, and good night, everyone.